Good morning and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you so much for being here as we discuss what you need to know about the upcoming release of macOS Big Sur, MDM, and the future of device management. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes to allow time for more folks to join us. So sit tight and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Welcome again to everyone joining us today for our webinar. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here as we talk about the impacts of macOS Big Sur and MDM with Apple experts and Mac admins Bradley Chambers and Tom Bridge, as they talk about how you can get your organization ready for Big Sur today and help streamline the transition from an IT and end user perspective. Today we plan to cover a lot of ground, including need-to-know info about Apple's MDM protocol, Big Sur OS changes, and how you could buy time before machines begin to run Big Sur. In just a moment, I'll introduce our experts and the stars of the show, but first, a couple of quick PSAs. I have my webcam off to preserve my audio quality. If you see our experts do that, that's just to make sure you guys can hear us loud and clear, but we'll try to keep those webcams on as long as possible. In terms of question and answers today, we'll have time at the very end of the webinar to answer on-topic questions, but please do chat over your questions anytime and we'll sprinkle some in throughout today's webinar. We'll answer as many questions as we can live, and we'll follow up if anyone needs any more information or an answer that we can't get to today. So without further ado, today I'm joined by Tom Bridge. He's a host of the Mac Admins podcast and a founding partner at Techlutionary. So Tom, I'm going to pass it over to you for a quick intro.
Well, good morning, Leah. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this webinar. It's a great pleasure to be here. We are at Techlutionary, we are a macOS and iOS consulting focused firm here in the Washington, D.C. area. And on the Mac Admins podcast, we're there to help bring to the fore all sorts of issues like this one, for example, that Mac admins face throughout. And you can find our podcast at podcast.macadmins.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for being here. We're also joined by Bradley Chambers. He is a writer at 9to5Mac and also an IT director at an education institution. So Bradley, thank you for being here, and I'll pass it over to you for a quick intro.
Hey, thanks. So I'm based out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I write for 9to5Mac. So if you come across any of our K-12 content, opinions, news, I usually write that. And then for my day job, I am an IT director at a school in Chattanooga, Tennessee, an all-Apple school, and I've been here for around 11 years, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, and thank you, Bradley. My name is Leah. I'll be your host for today and helping out with the Q&A, and happy to answer any questions after the event as needed. I've been at JumpCloud for just about a year as a product marketing manager and work really closely with our product side of the house on all things Apple MDM and device management across the OSs that everybody uses. So let's jump right into it. We know that macOS Big Sur is coming sometime soon. We don't know exactly when, but Tom and Bradley, what can we really expect in terms of what will be new for both admins and end users?
Sure, I'll take this to start, and Bradley, you can jump in. We can take turns kind of talking through some of the various different pieces here. So yeah, Big Sur kind of changes a lot of, the thing that the users will recognize first is that it changes a lot of the look and feel around the macOS things that we've long since seen. The dock is now a floating bar, much like it is on your iPads. And there are a lot of new icons that are associated with various things in the system preferences, as well as on the desktop. So, there's a huge adjustment there for users in terms of like, well, it doesn't quite look like it used to. However, various and sundry icons are for the better. Not all of them are, shall we say, but there's a huge visual difference in this release of macOS.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to keep in mind here is you really need to look at these updates in two lenses. There's things that we as end users are excited about, and there's also people in this webinar are into this industry, like we're into the new. And I think it's important to keep in mind is that's not the majority of people. If you're in education, this year has been very, very challenging. I know like this has been the most chaotic year we've ever had trying just to be in school, and we're happy to be here. And I know like at our school, we have physically changed everything about our technology this year. Everything was new this year, everything from the printers to the wiring in the building. And so one of the things that like I go through my mind is trying not to change things for the sake of changing things. And that's right when I think about a Big Sur and like day one updates is you really want to know that your users are ready and to know that they often view technology as just a tool, just like I might view my drill as just a tool to get a job done. And so there is a lot of visual difference. And I know that can sound funny to say, and we think it's lighthearted, but for a lot of people, they're used to it looking a certain way. And if you put them off of their game in the classroom or in a sales meeting, that can be hurtful to them. And so you have to really think through that. And as you think about deploying it, really get on the forefront of explaining that and showing the differences and showing, okay, here's the old way, here's the new way. It looks different, but it works the same sort of thing. And so this will be a challenging year, just like it reminds me of when iOS 7 came out and Safari was the same, but it looked different. The home screen looked different. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as we kind of look forward to this release. Tom and I were kind of speculating off air of when is Big Sur going to come out, and we don't know. I think Tom's point, and I think it's a very good point, expect it this month in October. I don't think it'll be in November. I don't think it'll be this week. It could be as early as say next week. We have the Apple event on the 13th for the iPhone introduction, so it's very possible they could say Big Sur's coming this Friday, or they could even say Big Sur's coming today. But you should expect it sometime this month.
I really hope that we get more than 24 hours notice. I saw, a lot of concern in the Mac admins community when iOS was magically released and nobody knew that it was coming literally within 24 hours. And given the way that update controls are often in the hands of the users, the challenges that some iOS admins and MDM admins even had to face in terms of the release of iOS 14 on, I think it was something along the lines of 22 hours notice, is certainly a huge challenge. And I'll say that we had some joking conversation with the team at the podcast that if that's the sort of way we get Big Sur, there may just be a podcast full of swearing that reaches your ears very quickly shortly after that announcement. But there is a process that Apple has to go through for all of this. I know that they have been hard at work on releasing some controls that we're going to talk a little bit about in the MDM section of this conversation to get that to the fore and to get those in everybody's hands. But I certainly don't think that everybody in the community thinks that it's totally ready now and we can expect it at any minute. But I feel like we may not get a fully ready operating system again.
Well, and the thing I tell our people when, because we have two types of users at our office. There are some that are super excited about the new stuff and some that would still be on Snow Leopard if they could be on it, is that you're going from the most stable version of Catalina to the most unstable version of Big Sur. Big Sur will be innovated on very quickly. And me personally, I could go back to the days of 18 months macOS updates really, really quick. From an admin perspective, you really, it's about controlling variables, and new operating systems change the variables again. And so it's new testing. It's okay, things work this way, now they work this way. But I think that's an important thing to communicate to your users as you progress with these updates, is to let them know like this is going to be just a hair more buggy than what we had before. And so, yeah, I am excited about it. I think it's going to be great. I hope it leads to some new hardware. But it is certainly a challenge, and this year has been challenging enough. And so for education customers, it's been a crazy fall, and Big Sur just adds to that craziness just a little bit.
So do we want to talk a little bit about the MDM side of things, because there are some changes here, as well as to the core operating system that I think that admins need to be aware of. Specifically, for example, the new network administration things that are along those lines. And do we want to jump in just for the Apple MDM protocol to begin with, Bradley? Does that sound good?
Sounds great. I mean, I think that the MDM world is it has become so critical in such a short amount of time. And I think, you know, the more I talk to people about MDM, it's that's really it feels like the way forward for all system administration. And you know, you really don't talk about binding to Active Directory much anymore. MDM is the future of all device management, certainly on the Apple side. And it is critical that you pick the right vendor, that you really learn these tools because they are so critical to how you operate. I'll tell you, just as kicking off something dumb I did yesterday is I had some machines that we had to buy some. I needed some iPads here quick for something, like so quick I could not buy them from Apple. I needed to buy them from Amazon to get them like overnighted here. Apple's still 4 to 6 weeks out on the new iPad. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to supervise these. They're literally going to be used for one application. Let me just plug them up Apple Configurator. I was like, I logged into my VPP account on Apple Configurator. And then I realized, oh, that was probably a mistake to log into VPP here because that's going to move the token from my MDM to my machine. And it did. And so thankfully in the MDM, when I logged back into my MDM, it alerted me to that. I just clicked retake ownership. But just know, like, that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with. And that's how critical MDM is, because if I had not fixed that, I could have broken things very quickly for a lot of people very quickly. So yeah, it's great to go, but let's move into the MDM stuff.
Sure, and there are a couple of new payloads this year. One that only appeared within the last couple of betas, and that's around the concepts of screen recording. So if you've worked at all with macOS Catalina and screen recording payloads, you've known that non-admin and admin users alike can allow screen recording for the operating system. And screen recording is really useful. It's kind of the Apple, it's the Apple parlance for I want to share my screen with a remote person, because it goes through the recording buffer to do that. And so one of the changes that's coming in Big Sur is that non-admins, at least by default, will not be able to permit an application to allow screen recording without an MDM payload. And so now there's going to be an MDM payload that is already available in documentation. You can find some more details on Appleseed, which is Apple's IT-focused portal for these kind of things. You can log in with any Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager ID at appleseed.apple.com and find the release notes for Big Sur there, and which includes a whole section of the sample profile for these various tasks. And so, for your organization, if you're focused, as many education student environments are, on machines that are not malleable in the hands of students, at least in their administrative configuration, you can use your MDM to deliver this profile, which will allow them to automatically permit, things like TeamViewer or, I'm thinking Splashtop, or even GoToMeeting with the ability to share your screen. And if your organization is working in a non-admin environment, whereas most of your users are actually just regular users on the machine, that's going to give you a lot of focus and take away a lot of tickets from your help desk, is to allow the user the ability to check that box as they had in Catalina. Now, I mean, obviously this isn't going to affect anybody who already is granted those permissions on machines that are already in the hands of users when they upgrade from Catalina to Big Sur. And they'll be able to continue to use the applications that are approved by your organization. But for example, if you run an organization, we have one client that has high security requirements and nobody's an admin. Literally no one in the organization has admin credentials on their own computer. We're going to have to deliver this profile as soon as they upgrade to Big Sur. That's the other thing that you need to recognize, is that some of these new profiles you can't deliver ahead of time. And so you need to make sure that your MDM is going to attempt to re-deliver these profiles when you switch versions. I know that there are several MDMs out there that have, some sort of check in place where it looks at the operating system of the machine that's checking in with their MDM. And so essentially your service at that location, and will push out new profiles when the machine reaches that final stage of, I have finally upgraded to macOS 11.0 Big Sur, and reapply profiles as necessary. So Bradley, what kind of cool stuff do we get in the new auto enrollment tools that we've got there?
Well, one of the things, auto enrollment to me is one of the best parts of being an Apple admin. I mean, there is something like pretty magical about the entire zero touch deployment, and I think that's been ever more critical this year as much as is anywhere. And so I really appreciate the work that Apple's done here to really make this a seamless experience to where you can order a machine. This is all existing today. That like you can literally order a machine directly from Apple and it onboard into your MDM, and the user can set it up and it can be pre-configured without IT ever kind of having to jump at it. And anybody that's worked in the Apple, the IT world for a long time knows that imaging is one of the most like painstaking processes that IT goes through. And so I really, really appreciate the work Apple's done here. They continue to enhance this with Big Sur as well. Gosh, I lost my train of thought here.
Well, I'll jump in and just say that the thing that really excites me about auto enrollment in Big Sur is the ability that auto advance now comes to the Mac. And so for those machines, for organizations that don't necessarily deliver machines directly to users, but deliver them to the help desk to be provisioned for the user, now you can actually set it up to go through the auto advance screens. This was something that was only available to tvOS devices like the Apple TV for the past couple of versions. And so if you have a machine that is plugged into Ethernet and plugged into power, you can advance all the way through those screens and get right to the login screen as quickly as possible. So if you're delivering applications via your MDM and your MDM is capable either through delivering Monkey or through another tool of installing applications at the user login screen, you can just plug that machine into power and Ethernet, wake it up, turn it on, and it's going to slide right through all of your configuration processes. Obviously, your MDM needs to support this, and you need to prepare your MDM for this situation. But if you can go through those processes, Auto Advance gives you kind of an easy button for your help desk to configure machines.
Well, and that's been a really kind of a great feature on iOS in terms of the speed it takes to get a device out. Most of that stuff in enterprise situations, you do just want to bypass it. And one of the things working on this summer, it shows how quickly the MDM process works is when you're kind of having to click through I'm kind of leaning out to get to that setting, you start seeing apps being installed before you're ever even logged in. The one I always see is it pops up Zoom and is like launching, we pre-install Zoom. It's launching that before as I'm going through the setup assistant. And especially in heavily customized environments, that's really going to speed it. It's going to speed it up quickly. So yeah, it's great to see. This is a really cool place to see the iOS enhancements moving over to macOS. We've got a question that does this require an adapter? Obviously, on laptops, you will need an Ethernet adapter. I use the ones from Anchor quite a bit. That's one of the ones we give to our employees that you can get them from Amazon. Anchor includes one with multiple USB, HDMI, and Ethernet on it. That's the one we use, but you'll have to kind of depend. Some of these require a driver, some of them don't. That's one of the things you want to check.
I know the Belkin one that is one that we use, a USB-C Belkin Ethernet adapter. It's a gig speed adapter. It does not require a driver of any kind. It's about $25, I seem to recall, on Amazon, and it works great for that.
Well, and that may be a situation where, particularly like on the MacBook Airs, since there's only 2 USBs, you kind of want to be stingy with those. So in your lab or in your setup, you may want to have those Belkins that you're setting up with, the ones you handle the end users, maybe you give them the Anchor ones that does require the driver, and you can preload, you can install that driver obviously through your process. But yeah, it's always good to have those. Obviously on desktops, they've still got Ethernet connections. I personally still wish the Macs had Ethernet connections. My role is if it's stationary at all, it gets plugged in. I like to even wire up Apple TVs when possible. Wi-Fi is great, but everybody in IT just trusts a cable as well.
Sure. One of the other things that we get as part of Big Sur is better use of encrypted DNS. And encrypted DNS, the ability to properly protect the information inside your organization behind an encrypted layer, so that your your internal domain names, for example, don't necessarily leak out over public networks, is certainly excellent. So I'm really excited to see encrypted DNS come to macOS. It's been available at least in part over iOS for the last release or so. And things are going along that way for macOS as well. But the one excitement that I saw from several folks that several folks are excited about is, especially for those people in video production who've now purchased a bunch of Mac Pros, is lights out management. And lights out management is one of those things that came around with the Xserve. And who remembers the Xserve? I know I do. We still have one over in our headquarters office over in Churchton. It used to be our mail server. Now it's just kind of sitting there. But you could lights out manage these devices. And now you can lights out manage a Mac Pro from a Mac Mini running Big Sur. You can throw the lights out management service on there. That's just going to be part of the Big Sur operating system. And so if you set up your network correctly, and there are some good guidelines available on Apple's developer site for how this is going to work, you can power on and power off Mac Pros and make sure that they end up back at the login screen so that there can be a secured boot with an encrypted volume remotely away from the machine. How many times have I had to go into an office to restart a machine that is properly file vaulted just to get back to the login screen during this pandemic? It's a bunch. And so, the ability to have that kind of service available, and I believe it's going to be available to any machine with a T2 chip in it. So any recent Mac Mini, any recent Mac Pro, any recent, MacBook Pro, although I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work with the Ethernet adapters. So keep an eye on this one. This is going to be a feature that we can explore in more detail once we've reached the release cycle.
And I really, honestly, lights out management, this feels like a 0.1 version of this. Like, I really see this being something that Apple innovates on year after year. I think that one of the things that's like frustrated me about Apple this year is cameras on the laptops, for example. And I do feel like in response to remote work, things they didn't see as important last year, we might see changes next year. And like, I think we'll see better cameras very quickly. And I think you're going to see a lot of tools around enabling IT administrators who manage Macs across the country, across the globe, making that easier. So I imagine they're probably working on those things now. But I really see lights out management being something that's, not everybody's going to need it, but the people that need it are fantastic. I think about our friends at Mac Stadium. Like, this is the kind of stuff that is really, really built for them.
Yeah, and shout out to Shadi and his team at Mac Stadium who are running their IT operation. And they've got all kinds of challenges like this in data centers, and it's the last place you want to be is in a big space with lots of fans blowing stuff around in the middle of a pandemic. So I can definitely understand that environment. So let's talk. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, content caching, I think, is something that there's some nice enhancements here, and this content caching has been around for a while, and there was a rumor a long time ago. You show how long I've been a little bit around the Apple scene for that Apple is going to use torrents to help speed up the delivery of macOS updates. Tom, do you remember that rumor years and years ago?
Yeah.
And honestly, still sounds like a good idea. I could be nice. Like, well, the rumor at the time was you're going to be able to trade in your bandwidth for iTunes gift cards or something. Still would do it. Like, give me free. I will let you, run off macOS updates off my network here in exchange for a free iCloud or something. Anyways, one of the challenges to content caching is like you kind of didn't know it worked, and now there's a new content caching information MDM command that kind of gives you a little bit of insight of how this is doing, because before it was like one of those, like, we hope it's working. And like in our school, I got Chattanooga, if you're not familiar with, the fastest internet in the country. We have gigabit internet everywhere in the city. Residential, it's $70 a month. It's fantastic. So I've got no metered bandwidth. But in places where even if you have a terabyte a month in the home, content caching could be great, because that's a way you're downloading iOS 14 or macOS Big Sur. If you have multiple devices, you kind of don't want to download it that many times, because it can be a big one. And so we are seeing some nice enhancements here where you can kind of know more of, is content caching working?
Yeah. And the other thing that we get as part of the new content caching situation is that it's now caching internet recovery. If you've ever had to boot a machine with a bad disk over internet recovery on a DSL connection, you know how painful that is. So to be able to cache that in your environment is going to make technical difficulties on individual machines a lot easier to repair. Because essentially you're going to be able to boot off of that internet recovery volume coming off your local network instead of coming from Apple's CDN. So I'm excited by that as well. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is one of the new changes that's coming for Big Sur around the concepts of supervision. We talked about supervision for like a half second back there when Brad was talking about his iPads. You can now grant a machine that is user approved in your MDM, so a machine that's been manually enrolled or a machine that has been enrolled via non-DEP means, shall we say, into a supervision profile for macOS. And so essentially this will allow you to do, it'll allow you to control activation lock bypass. It will allow you to use a bootstrap token for those activation or for those environments that are using AD binding. And will want a bootstrap token. You now don't require a DEP enrollment to get it. You'll be able to essentially query and list and delete local users from your MDM on a machine that has just been user approved, not just one that's been supervised. So essentially, user approved MDM now becomes the gateway. It's not just, was this machine enrolled via DEP or not? It is whether or not the user has approved the enrollment of the device. So this is a huge change. It's very, very welcome, especially for those enterprise environments who might have, completed the merger from another purchased company and bought a company who didn't have devices in DEP. Now any user approved device is the same as a device that comes down from Apple Business Manager. So the huge change there that is really, really clutch for Mac admins.
This is a situation where we were over here with supervision, and it was like, and I understand Apple's mindset of we don't want end users to have their machines taken over by a company without their authorization. So I appreciate that. And people already have enough fear of I don't want to install this certificate, and I get that these are personal devices, especially if it's a personal device or you're bringing your own device. So, but I feel like Apple started here, and over time we brought this back here. And what they did with iOS is nice, where it requires you to wipe the device, and then the user can opt out. And this is a situation where I feel like Apple is recognizing that there are edge cases where there might need to have this happen. I mean, just a simple example. Let's say you don't have a lot of spares. Let's say I always try to keep 5 laptops at all times, in the box ready to go. But what if you don't have the budget to do that? Or what if you don't? What if you have somebody starting suddenly and your boss says, hey, I need them to have an iMac, and you don't have an iMac, and it's 2 weeks from Apple, and you have to go to Best Buy and buy an iMac. Well, before you're like, I can't, now this stinks, I can't manage this the same way. Well, now you can work around that. And I feel like this is just a win for IT departments everywhere, because again, we all like to think we've got everything perfectly in line, but there are times when you just got to run to the Apple Store, you got to run to Best Buy, or you got to order something off Amazon because it's on sale, and you had $800 in the budget, and the MacBook Air is on sale for $800, and you bought it. Now we have a workaround, and that's just, I feel like that's Apple sitting back and knowing and listening to customers and saying, okay, there are situations, and we're going to find a path for supervision.
And if we can't get the ability to backport a device into DEP that way, at least we're getting a way to supervise that device as a company-owned device in those cases. And for all those admins out there, thinking about their own BYOD environments, I really, really hope that you are looking at user enrollments for your MDM so that they're separate from company enrollments, because if they're using their own device, you should not be supervising their device. Just general reminder there.
One, before we moved on, I meant to, and it may just be that's having this issue, but I deployed like 75 laptops this summer. 60 of them worked perfectly with enrollment out of the box. A handful of them, and I've talked to some other IT admins that had issues with auto enrollment through the setup process. It was returned like a null screen. Tom, have you heard this?
Oh, yeah. So this was actually fixed in macOS 10.5, 10.15.7, and versions going forward. I was thrilled to see that Apple fixed it so that essentially frequently these machines were MacBook Airs. Frequently they were being done in warm rooms. And so they were hitting a thermal limit on the device while being set up, and essentially that prevented the user certificate from being generated out of the secure enclave. And so Apple, saw this problem. There are some really great posts by Nathaniel Strauss of the Shakopee Public Schools District, who had a lot of focus on this issue this summer. And I was very thankful to see that Apple came around and fixed it ahead of time and didn't require Big Sur for that. And if your organization is getting machines that are out of the supply chain that are running 10.15.6 and later, or earlier rather, and there are still some of those coming out of warehouses. We did receive a shipment of laptops recently that was all 10.15.5. There are ways to bring them up to speed, shall we say, before bringing them out of the box and getting them through that enrollment workflow. And I would encourage folks to look at Two Canoes, MDS or Mac Deploy Stick, which is free to use. You can buy support, which is highly recommended. Tim Perfett and his team over there are iterating on that software really rapidly and came up with a really good fix for this summer. So take a look at MDS if you're out there in the Mac admins community. It's really, really helpful to patch the software on the machine before you even get to the first boot screen. And that will fix your user certificate issue.
I wish I'd known this at the time because I didn't know this. So here's how
this is a recent fix.
Yeah. So and so the reason I bring this up is with content caching. And so what I was having to do to fix these machines is I was basically having to boot them straight into Internet Recovery, wipe them and reinstall, and that's how I fixed it. But again, these were big downloads. So this is, let's say, so the reason it's so helpful to have Internet Recovery or this recovery, you can cache it locally, is for a situation like this in the future where you're not going to have to go in the middle of the day and have this big download. So yeah, I meant to bring that up earlier, but it's good. It's good to know that it wasn't just me. I kind of started to hear for some other folks. Super frustrating, but good to know that it's in the future. But yeah, content caching is fantastic.
I was talking to a colleague out on the West Coast, Chris Daw, for all the Mac admins out there, who recently did a package of 22 MacBooks, MacBook Airs with an MDS stick, and essentially they had 0 failures on enrollment. So this is a solved problem with 10.15.7. So thank you to Apple for backporting that solution. For a while, they were threatening to just make that a Big Sur fix. So thank you to the folks inside Apple who are clearly listening to their customers, and I appreciate that. One of the other things that we get as part of Big Sur is some changes to the security model. And we're obviously, Apple has said for a long time that kernel extensions are limited life. And while they still sort of kind of function in macOS Big Sur, there are network and system extensions that are really meant for this process. There are some gotchas around the system extension and network extension processes, and those are still being worked on in beta. But you should be asking your various, if it's a security extension that's running a kernel extension or a network VPN, for example. I think of here Cisco AnyConnect. You're going to want to make sure that your organization is ready for that before making the leap to Big Sur. And if you've got a tool that's showstoppered by Big Sur, and you should be testing by now, then you need to be ready for that, discussion that we were just talking about, whether to deploy or delay. And we're going to get to a more extensive conversation there in just a minute. But should we talk? I think we've got a bunch of questions queued up. Leah, should we jump to those?
Absolutely. I'd love to sprinkle a few of these in. The first that I want to get to is just really triple clicking on Apple MDM. Is that going to be required before Big Sur rollout?
I would argue it's been required for a couple of years now. And if you don't have an MDM, you really should. Is it required for rollout inside your organization? No, it is not. You can continue to run Apple products just as you always have been able to, with no management on them whatsoever. I would say that that's not the most responsible way to manage the computers in a business.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a 2-person office, I could see not having an MDM.
Yep.
But that should be the exception, and the norm should be MDM. And because it's really clear that the path forward for Apple's system management is through MDM, and it's not complicated to get rolled out. There's a lot of vendors out there that make this very easy to do it. So not required, but recommended.
Yeah, I would say it's absolutely recommended. Yeah.
Awesome. And then we do have several questions that I can see here on the back end for folks just looking for Apple MDM recommendations. And while I want to keep this mostly, about different options out there that folks can work with since everybody's IT environment is different. I will do a quick shout out to join JumpCloud office hours on October 23rd, where we can answer all of your JumpCloud MDM questions. We are an Apple MDM vendor, but Tom and Bradley, what are some of the other Apple MDMs that people might explore for their Apple device management needs?
Bradley, you want to take first shot?
Yeah, you know, and it's hard to so I guess let me preface this with like, every MDM is using the same APIs. And I think that's great because it lets you know that if you do have to change vendors, you're not going to have to like rebuild how you do things. Like configuration profiles are configuration profiles. I've used multiples over the last many years. They're all great and all have their flaws. Popular one is obviously the folks at Jamf do a nice job. They've got Jamf Pro, Jamf School, and Jamf Now. I've used all three of them. All of them have their good and bad parts. The folks at Adigy really do a really nice job. They have a really cool feature called Live Desktop, which allows you to basically create a VNC tunnel right to a machine. Really, really cool. The folks at Mosul do a nice job. Fleetsmith is the kind of the wild card because they are owned by Apple, and that transition was not good. We're not going to go into that here, but that transition day that came out of nowhere was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of frustration for Fleetsmith customers, and rightfully so. I understand what Apple did, but that's neither here nor there. And then the folks at obviously JumpCloud is a really, really nice product. And I think the cool thing is my advice is demo a bunch of them, see which one works best, see which one just fits with your organization. Like Jamf School has some nice K-12 features, but like if depending on your school, you may not need those. If you're already using JumpCloud for identity management, it really makes a lot of sense to use JumpCloud's MDM. So demo them all. My main advice is get one that costs money. Don't get one that's free if it's mission critical. Get one that costs money, and get one where they have a history of being ready for Apple's iOS updates and Big Sur or macOS updates day one. That's probably my best advice to you. But you don't want to get one. That's my fear with free ones, is that they won't be ready. They're going to be 6 months behind on supporting new features.
Yep. For me, we support many MDMs in our business. We support Meraki Systems Manager, we support Mosul, we support Simple Admin, we support Workspace ONE, and obviously, we every now and again hit a new MDM that we're supporting. We've taken the tour behind the scenes at Kanji, and they're doing some very, very interesting stuff, especially for security remediations and things like that, that were really, really cool to see. I mean, obviously, Jamf is the 800-pound gorilla on the scene, and they've been doing a lot of really good work to support everything on day one, and they are a very excellent resource for that particular product. They're also incredibly expensive if you are a for-profit business, so be aware there. We have supported now JumpCloud's MDM for a couple of clients, and it does exactly what it says on the tin right now. And I know that Scott and his team have a lot prepared as we go down towards Big Sur and beyond. So definitely keep the eye on JumpCloud. If you're already a JumpCloud customer, it's incredibly low friction to move to that MDM. And strong recommendation for taking a look at that, especially if your IT department is looking to, shall we say, economize on the number of services that they pay for. So that is certainly, it carries its own value. And there's a lot of things out there. What I'd really be looking for is, can it deliver packages like Monkey, for example? We use Monkey to do all of our software updates, no matter the MDM. And so you need an MDM that can deliver your management solution. And whether or not an agent is available on the disk is certainly valuable to you as well, because MDMs can't do everything that you might want to do in a management environment. So I would say those are the two things that you need to look for first. Good quality support, whether or not you've got an organization that's, shall we say, stable, I think matters a lot too. So
clear business model, that's key. Clear business model.
Clear business model really helps. Whether or not you're the customer or not, you just need to understand how they make their money.
You just don't want to be in a situation where you have to change MDM vendors unexpectedly. It can be done, not ideal, and a lot of people have done that, and it's not ideal. I mean, again, the benefits here are, you don't lose access to any of your apps. If you like on the iOS side, you don't lose anything to the VPP store. All that stuff you keep. You basically just move these tokens around from Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager over.
Yeah, for supervised MDMs on iOS though, for supervised devices, there's only pain there, and I wish I had a better solution for you. So definitely talk with your customer success people, no matter which organization you go to, and ask them about transition planning and how they can help you during that process. And that's great to do during the sales cycle.
Awesome, great advice. Thank you guys. And I want to keep us moving along to the final section of our webinar before more time for Q&A. And that is just a general discussion about what's right for your organization. Is it better to deploy Big Sur on Mac machines, or might it be better to delay? So what kind of considerations or reasons to not upgrade would we advise folks on?
Sure. And I'll come out and say what I tell all of our clients. We will support Big Sur on the day that it is released. And we will support it in every environment that we can support it in. And we recognize that's not all of our environments, because they're critical pieces of software that may or may not be ready yet. And what you have to look at in your organization is, what are the showstoppers? Do you have a VPN? That is driven by a kernel extension? Do you have security software that's driven by a kernel extension? These are the kind of things that you have to be aware of inside your organization as mission critical. You also have to figure out, like, what are your critical apps inside your organization? Are you ready with Office? For example, it was recently announced that Office 2016 is coming to an end, right? Like, so now this is not the Office 365 version of of those Office apps. However, if you bought a volume license for Office 2016, it will not be supported in Big Sur, because essentially it ends its life in the next couple of days. So, and Big Sur not having been released yet, it still will not be supported. So you have to look at things like, what are your key elements of software here? And will they run in Big Sur? And again, as I said earlier, you should be testing that now. So, figuring out what the showstoppers are, but I would strongly encourage everyone who is able to deploy or allow their users to self-deploy as soon as they're comfortable. And, while we do get the ability as admins to delay things, and that now includes major versions as of Big Sur, you do get the ability to kind of let your users make that choice on their own. And I think that's a valuable choice.
I think for me, a lot depends on the makeup of your organization and their willingness to deal with quirks. Because again, I mean, I think where a lot of us are long past the days of just like things breaking on day one. Obviously, it still happens to, again, like you said, VPNs, but a lot of apps just generally still work. But things can be very buggy. And so for my users, I will delay until we at least, because I know we're going to get a rapid bug fix upgrade. There may be a 0.1 update within 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what. So I'm of the mindset that I like to delay at least a few weeks to get a bug fix release out, unless there's a clear reason for it. And so unless it addresses an issue we have, there's a security thing we're concerned about. And so that's my mindset. But again, every organization is differently, and it is one of those things where it is ideal if you have a user that's like, hey, I really want to try this feature. It's like, I say, okay, you can do that, but just know that if there's a bug, I may not be able to fix it. And these are one of those situations where if you do deploy, there may be things that break that aren't your fault, but they become your problem. And I think that's the mindset. Like, you may not have always have the reason. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is you may not be deploying today, but you may be buying a Mac the day after Big Sur comes out, and it may come with Big Sur. And so you can't just like have this like head in the sand mindset of like, we're not doing Big Sur for 90 days. Like, you may not have that choice if you buy things. And that's on the flip side, that's software vendors too. It's not feasible to say like, oh, we're not going to be supporting Big Sur till next year. It's like, well, you know, that sounds great to not upgrade, but you may have people that are new customers that are buying new machines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also look at things like Apple Silicon. Apple has not announced a new machine yet, but when they do, Apple Silicon will only run Big Sur and later. It has not been backported for Catalina. And so you need to be ready for that kind of situation where suddenly you have, there's a new, should we say a low cost Mac, something lower cost than even the MacBook Air, for example, because Apple makes their own processors and those are going to be cheaper than the ones they were buying from Intel. They can definitely handle things, in that path. And you just got to be ready to deal with it. And some of your operations are going to be challenges. And for example, we had a couple of users who, for whatever reason, please God, have ended up on the Big Sur beta during this beta cycle unintentionally. And we have a user that said, I didn't do it, but I ended up on the Big Sur beta cycle. And now we've just got to deal with their situation. And there are ways to, wipe the machine, DFU the T2 chip, which is something you have to do if they ended up on the Big Sur beta, and take them back to Catalina. It's very disruptive, very, very disruptive to their workflow. And so essentially you've got to prepare. And one of the things that we did for at least one of the users who ended up that way was essentially walk them through, all right, we're going to use you as a guinea pig here. We're going to work together. And we're going to work together. You get enhanced support from our team so that we can use you as a test user during this process. And we decreased our SLA so that they could get support within half an hour if they needed it, on-site support within 2 hours, so that we could support that user in such a way that we could learn from that process too, because that's huge amount of help for us inside an organization to have a user who's on the beta cycle. And is it ideal? No, absolutely not. But it gave us the ability to kind of preview some of the issues that they were facing, either with their authentication schemas or things like that. So that's been where we've been. I generally don't like to delay deployment because Big Sur will be the most secure operating system that Apple has to offer. And security matters a lot to our clients, especially our clients who are, shall we say, in interesting parts of the world or interesting industries, and they have a high security need. And so Apple has said, oftentimes, they'll release a security patch for a previous version, 10.15, 10.14 sometimes, but I don't think that we can count on that. The most secure operating system is the one that Apple releases on day one. So working from that environment, I think, is certainly valuable. So I will not be issuing delays unless we absolutely have to, but knowing that the MDM can help us with that and give us the ability to say, okay, let's push that out 30 days and see where we are in 20 days and see how we feel, whether that's the VPN client testing or whether that's testing on the other things. I've heard some mixed results from the folks that are testing AnyConnect right now. And various and sundry other security products. We have other clients who we're just going to tell them you can't upgrade right now, and provide them a profile to say we're just going to push this out 90 days, and then once we get through testing of either their security product or their network product or both, let them update. But we've only got 90 days to get this right, and Apple's not going to let us delay beyond that. So be aware.
All right, thank you guys so much for all of those tips and advice. I want to move us right along in our final 10 minutes to an open Q&A session. We have a ton in the queue and we will try to crank through as many live now as we can. And remember, you'll get a follow-up email. You can always get in touch via email or join us in the Jump Cloud Lounge for any additional information that we can help out with. So let's see how many of these questions we can crank through. We have one about testing before Big Sur arrives. And you've spoken a little bit about getting this up and going. So would you recommend using a virtual machine or any other ways that people can test before Big Sur gets here?
Sure. I mean, virtual machines are part and parcel of how we do things. This development cycle was a little bit of a challenge to do VMs. And I mean, certainly, individual hardware machines are going to have the most comparable experience to to the end, but to the end user experience when you get to Big Sur. but I tested in VMs. I have a spare old MacBook Air. I think it's like a 2015 MacBook Air that we ran Big Sur on right away, and just to be like, all right, let's put beta 1 on it and see if it catches fire. It did not, thankfully. Those are messy to clean up. But you get to that point where you want to test some development cycles. It's going to be a lot easier to test that in a VM than it is going to be able to test that in on a regular machine. Apple did not make as many like full version installers as available as I'd like. This time around, I think we only got 2. I think we got beta 1 and then like beta 3 and then beta 8, I guess, beta 9. So it was more difficult to test enrollment cycles this time out. But having ways to just, 1, run the operating system, and 2, run it in hardware mode they're both important processes to your beta cycle.
Well, and it's a little late at this point if you've not been testing to like do the full round, but just definitely keep that in mind for next summer.
It's never too late to test. We still have at least a week.
That's true. What I do is I have 2 laptops. I have one that I leave at the office, one I have at home. The one at home goes on the new update immediately, and then that's where I hammer on. I bring it in and out. That way I can still have my kind of corporate machine to do the mission critical stuff. And there was one year I couldn't print all summer, so I was like, I don't want to have a second laptop. And I just hammer on things. Like I go through workflows and try use our core apps. I mean, you're not going to be able to test everything, every edge case, but like to do the core things that your employees are going to be doing. And so yeah, DMs are a great way to do that as well.
Yep.
Awesome. And touching back on the topic of security, we know that Mac endpoint security software might need some special considerations for Big Sur since kernel extensions are restricted. So any options or recommendations for Mac endpoint security software that you guys would recommend?
Bradley, you want to take this one first?
I mean, not to bring them, I think the key thing is here is you need to use one, you need to find one that it's using Apple's endpoint here. And that's really going to be the path of least pain going forward. Jamf makes a nice product that's been well supported and well maintained, the continual updates that they are using that new endpoint. I think they may have been the first, and I'm not sure. The issue is most of these security companies are trying to do cross-platform stuff, and it is difficult. It's very costly to redo that stuff and to be where it's using Apple's endpoint. And so Jamf makes a nice product here. The name is, what's the name of it?
Jamf Protect. Jamf Protect is if you're already using Jamf Pro, Protect is an extension of your license, and helps you cover a lot of these things. From my perspective, that's a great offering. That's a good way to look at things, especially if you're already on Jamf. If you're not, I would look at Command Reporter, CMD Reporter, from the folks at CMD Security, Command Security. That team has been working incredibly hard on delivering a native experience and have delivered a really, really good one. I actually think they were to market before Jamf Protect was. I know they weren't the first either. I think there have been a couple of other vendors who've brought their product to market first. They're more, they work with your SIEM. So if you've already got a security endpoint on the logging endpoint, they're helping you streamline that hose of data down to like a water pick. Right? And so essentially, if you're looking at all of the logging data that's available in macOS, you really only care about little things like, well, did somebody sudo at their command line? They weren't supposed to. If you ever tried that and you've gotten the note that says, hey, oh, this is going to be logged in the log. You've done a bad thing, you non-admin user, and tried to sudo a command. Does that ever get looked at by an organization? In a lot of cases, that's looked at by SIEMs and things like that. So I would look at CMD Reporter. That's an excellent one.
All right, and we have a few questions that I can see here about any need to know process breaking changes that will come with Big Sur that admins should know about. So Tom and Bradley, anything beyond what we've covered about process breaking changes that we want people to know about?
I guess it depends on what kind of processes. I mean, we've already talked a little bit about how auto enrollment has changed and why it's really, really important to test your environment under Big Sur. And so if you should test your MDM enrollment, especially for brand new machines, since brand new machines are probably on the way and they're probably only going to run Big Sur. So, having a way to test that environment really, really matters to your organization. In terms of other processes that are out there, making sure you can print and scan and do all of those other things that your employees may do more often than you do, and that's really going to matter. So taking a look at the holistic needs of your organization from an IT perspective really helps during Big Sur testing. I can't think of anything that's really going to be different than that, other than you may have some devices that have hardware drivers. I'm thinking here of some some of the high-end cards and things like that that might need for video editing and things like that might need a new system extension as opposed to a kernel extension. So validating those kind of processes is going to matter too, especially if you have a kind of a specialty workstation or things that are more than just your standard office person.
Yeah, I second all of that. We had a video production machine that I left on Snow Leopard for a long time just because it was like, it works. It actually wasn't even on the internet. Like, it just had one function, and it's like, it's one of those, like, to me, that just works. I don't really want to touch it. It uses one app, and on those kind of things, it's like, until that app, something breaks with that, and they tell us we have to upgrade the operating system, just not touching it. I don't gain anything by upgrading that machine. There's no benefits.
Awesome, thank you guys. And we have about 3 minutes left. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can, but I think a good one that I'm seeing a theme around is for folks that are just new to MDM, if that's Apple, if that's for other devices like Windows and Linux, what considerations do people new to MDM, what considerations do they have to be aware of when they're looking to implement a solution, especially with perhaps a younger company that is fully remote these days?
I think the thing is to not start with the MDM, to start with Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, get that set up first, because everything's going to stem from that. And I think it would be great to be setting that up from scratch in 2020, because I have these like old legacy accounts that are like, the old VPP store, the old device enrollment program, and Apple's really consolidated them all. And I've got way too many random Apple IDs, and that I'm certain one day it's just going to all fall apart. So I think it'd be fun to set that up from scratch and have it all be new. But start there, get that stuff set up with Apple. That's paperwork. That's getting an Apple Store login. So when you buy a machine, it comes tied to your organization. Then your MDM can see it, and then start with that. And then I think too is if you in a situation where you don't have MDM already and you're setting it up, make sure your employees know what you can and cannot do. Like if you're asking employees to enroll in the MDM to access corporate email, corporate apps, let them know that you can't see your text, like text messages. Let them know that. I mean, we all know that you can't see that. That's an Apple thing, how they manage it. You can't see their photos. Let them know that, and if you can show them somehow, I think that's good. But I think a lot of people get weary on things like that. That like all of a sudden employees are, you can read text messages, read private things. Let them know that that's not possible. MDM is a good thing. It's not a bad thing to have your computer be enrolled in the MDM. It makes things automated. My personal Mac is enrolled, or my Mac at work is enrolled in our MDM, and I could easily just not have mine in there and have full control over it. But like, it's easier to have it enrolled in the MDM. So yeah, just take the time to explain it to people.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly valuable. But, from my perspective, what I'm interested in from the MDM's perspective, especially with a group of remote workers, is that I can at that point, I think here of the difficult parts of the IT job, and I think here of, should we say, unplanned termination of users. And the ability to, at that point, just freeze them out of their machine. So you want to make sure that you can lock a machine. You want to make sure that it's not just enough to lock the machine. You want to make sure that you have the ability to, when you get that machine back, not depend on the user giving up their password. So having file vault encryption keys and the recovery keys escrowed with your MDM. So I think that that's going to be super helpful to getting that environment taken care of properly. You're going to want to think about security requirements. What kind of things do I need to deploy on this machine to make it work? And what does that mean for my kernel extension policy for 1015 machines, or system and network extension policies for 1016 machines and 1015 machines? And those are the kind of things that you've got to think about now as part of your MDM on how you're going to do that. And so those are the places where I start if you are just new to MDM, figuring out those kind of things, and then just testing the heck out of your environment. Getting a new machine or getting finding an old machine that's enrolled in your system that you can then test with. And validate your own testing. It's never enough just to send something in the field unvalidated. You've got to go through the process of, can I lock this machine? Great, I can. Can I unlock this machine once it's back in my hands? Can I use a recovery key to decrypt the disk? Can I use all of these other tools that are there? Can I validate the results of my work so that I can prove to my organization that I'm doing exactly what I say? That really, really matters too. So,
Leah, before we wrap up, I want to give a plug, Tom. I know I wouldn't say this, but I'll say it for him. You should join the Mac Admins community. If you listen to one podcast a week, make it the Mac Admins podcast. There is a lot. It's 2020. We're not going to conferences, and I highly recommend a lot of these conferences. The JNUX, all these conferences are fantastic for learning about how to manage Macs. But we can't travel right now, and so Mac Admins podcast, Mac Admin Slack community. Very welcoming group of people. Come in there and say, I'm just getting started. If you have a question, like, you'll throw it in the Slack channel, somebody will help you, and they won't charge you for it. I mean, it's a really cool community, and you would behoove yourself to make that your kind of professional development time, is like getting into that podcast, listening to some of the old episodes. Just that's a good way to learn on the go.
Yeah, and the MacAdmin Slack community is available at macadmins.org. It's free to sign up. You just need an email address. That's it.
Beautiful. Those are excellent resources, and we hope to see everybody there and keep the conversation going before Big Sur arrives sometime soon. That hour absolutely flew by. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today, and a massive thank you to you too, Tom and Bradley, for being here and sharing all of your expert advice. So huge thanks, and hope we can do this again sometime.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Leah, for the invite.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Take care, everyone.